Whenever you're ready. We're good? All right. Well, hello, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. Kevin Riles with Siteline Planning and Approvals, and I want to thank Phil and Sina for the invite today. So I brought some of the team with me, which we'll discuss here in a second introduction, but we're really here to talk about land development, value of land, and everything around that. And certainly when we're done, we open it up to any sort of questions. So just on some introductions. So we've got Isabel with us, who is one of our planning managers, Jane, planning manager, and Chris Walsh, planning manager. I will say these nice slides, Jane and Isabel's slides are good. Mine were a mess. So Chris is the technical guru in the group that kind of put this together. So if there's something that jumps out during the presentation, feel free just to, put your hand up and we'll jump in. So why don't we go right in? I'm going to try to just look at the screen a little bit enough. We know this, and so I don't have to back to anybody. So lessons from land development planning. So my background, and it's nice to see a gentleman here who's got as much gray hair as myself. I've been doing this 37 years. So the first part of my career, I was a municipal director of planning and development, which I wanted to get to know the inside of how the government side worked. And then I ran the corporate for a while, so I was a VP of a land development firm. And then for the last 20 years, Siteline's been consulting with developers, builders on trying to get projects approved. And over our journey, we've done about 1,500 projects. So we've seen a lot, learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, which is how you learn. So where we've been, we're going to look at 2000 to 2022. And as realtors, you appreciate this. Halifax in 2000 and Halifax in 2015 and Halifax today, completely different places. So when you think about it, the average vacancy rate, apartment buildings for that 20-year period was going somewhere between 3%, 3.4. Now, depending on the month, you're looking at 0.8%, 1%. We've got an estimate of about 55,000 apartment units in the city. It's staggering. There's only like 500 apartment units available at any one time. So the apartment business has been crazy. Look at basically home prices. I mean, this is astonishing. $150,000. Actually, that's closer to 2,000, not 215. That's all right. It's gone up. I'll give you a perfect example. You may know McIntosh Estates in Spryfield below Governor's Brook. We started that. The first phase, we sold 96 lots to Clayton. The lot for a parcel was $137,000 that allowed you to put a semi on it, 2 units. First house that Clayton sold was $309,000. Fast forward to phase 3. There's 4 phases, 350 semis. So phase 3 right now sold a parcel. Imagine this for $340,000. It went from basically 100 and call it 40 to basically now 340,000. Mara Homes just sold in phase 2. And phase 2 to me is probably the least attractive phase, if I can say that, because it's on a main thoroughfare. 2,070 square foot semi for 630,000. Wow. And that's not even phase 3 and 4, which is the nicest lots on the McIntosh run. And I would say McIntosh Estates for new home construction is some of the most affordable homes you can get. So that's the market we're dealing with, you're dealing with, and trying to get through that. So when you're trying to deal with land, like how do you get to this? How do you try to figure out what the costs are? And so we talk about today. So right now, as you know, there's a shortage of about 20,000 units in the city. That's from the province, CMHC, everybody agrees, the city, and that's a combination of apartment units, single family duplex, right up to townhouses. The province, unfortunately, is of the opinion, along with CMHC, is that by 2030, that could be 50,000 units. Can't build them quick enough. So we produce about 6,000 permits a year in construction. We need about 12,000 to meet the demand. A lot of that has to do with trades and some other factors. So we're falling behind, unfortunately. Various levels of government are trying to do some things to catch up, but we're in a deficit. Population of about 500,000 today, estimated to be 600,000 by 2030. 1 million people by 2060. Imagine 1 million people. So the housing crisis and shortage, trying to address that is a generational issue. So where we're heading, goals to double population, amount of units, major changes in policy. And you see governments on every level, provincial, federal, and the municipalities across Canada struggling and running to get this dealt with. Challenges in land development, still trades. The HRM approval process has historically been difficult. To give you an example, in approval times, Paul in his past life, was the UDI chair, Nova Scotia, Paul was home builders. Was even more struggles back then. Given the time, HRM, I think it was a year ago, of the top 33 cities in Canada population wise, which we ranked 13th, was ranked 28th out of 33 approval times. So it's been an ongoing struggle in HRM for many reasons. Now, within HRM, there's different sections. Historically, their permitting division has always been fairly strong. Subdivision division, it's been the planning and approvals, but not much can happen to get the planning approvals. So that's been their big struggle in getting approvals done. And they've been working on that hard, but that's been an historic issue. Government expertise and outsourcing, we've seen that. Building material costs are going up. One thing, I give you an example, this Macintosh Estates, which is the 350 units, the total infrastructure out there, and we're working with Dexter and Servant Dumbrag, is $30 million. We put a phase out between phase 3 and 4. In 3 years, it went up 50%. That's common. So road construction, whether it's Dexter or Atlantic Road, 16 to 17% a year. So that contract between phases gets passed down. And what you'll see, for example, to build a pad-ready lot one side in 2020 was roughly $57,000. In 2022, it was $72,000. In 2024, it's $95,000. Where do you think that $40,000 gets transferred? Homeowner. And you can't avoid that. Doesn't matter if you're Clayton, Armco, you might get a little bit of a better deal, but the home construction costs are up, not only with fees from government, but the road construction is a huge price. NIMBYs and caves. So we all know the phrase NIMBYs, not my backyard. Once upon a time, when Paul and I were working as chairs and various, I got in trouble with the press because they said, "What's the problem in Halifax?" And I said, "It's not NIMBYs, it's cave dwellers." And the reporter said, "What's cave?" Citizens against virtually everything. And my UDI board said, "Kev, you got to calm that down a bit, right?" At the end of the day. So it's gotten better because necessity has forced HRM now to put height and density in places that historically might have taken 5 or 10 years. They don't have a choice. We need places to rent, we need places to buy. Land availability. These are key things. You know, you go out there and you have a client and they say, "Sina, Phil, Paul, I got 100 acres, and 100 acres could be in Beaverbank or Chesapeake or such and such, Pockwalk. What do you think?" "Oh, 100 acres on service, maybe 25,000 an acre, service maybe 100, makes sense." Well, we find, and we do this daily, and we probably do 3 or 4 of these reports a day, is yes, but what actually is the land worth? What can you do with it? And what's developable? You can have 100 acres. 100 acres is 30% wetland, or it's got a water course, or it's got poritic slate. All of these things, they add up. So the key is not what the land is, what you can do with it. And so what happens is you get it, you put it on the market, say, "I got 100 acres. I think even if it's 10,000 an acre, it's $1 million. When a developer looks at it and hires a firm like us, we do this research that the guys are going to get into and say, "Well, here's the news. You might have 100 acres and you're thinking I could do 5 lots an acre. Here's what you find." So we do a lot of wetlands, water courses, slate, which is commonly known as fool's gold. Most of that's on the peninsula. You'll know the Waterfront Development Corp. You dig that up, it's got a bacteria. Basically, once it's exposed, will kill aquatic life. So you clean up and dig up poritic slate, you got to ship that down to the Bedford waterfront or the Fairview site. So that's an expense. You don't want to find that. And then there's other costs and interest rates and all that we deal with. So the values of land. So, you know, most people intuitively, particularly in the real estate business, think, "Oh, I've got a certain value." But in the development community, we think a little bit differently. So raw land, I'll go back to the 100 acres. Raw land today is worth X. But what about basic paper? So this is why we say, whether you're a realtor or a property owner, there's ways to increase value with not always spending a lot of money. Basic paper is, for example, if you submit a concept plan to HRM, which a concept plan will run you $3,000 to $5,000, $500 at the city. What it says is HRM is, "I want to take the 100 acres and do, for example, 50 lots. HRM will tell you, in concept, that 50 lots makes sense. You should feel comfortable now going to a surveyor, a civil engineer, somebody like us, and say, "Get the detailed engineering drawing." Right? But in HRM, you can't do that first until you get the concept, because they don't want you wasting tens of thousands of dollars. That concept plan adds value because now a buyer says, City has told you your concept, let's promise. But for $5,000, why not at least get the concept done to the clients? This is the detailed paper. So you take the concept plan, which is really a fancy sketch. Now you get the engineers to actually do the detailed designs, the road print to build a road. That on average will cost you $2,500 a lot. So if you had 100 lots, you said, and you went to us, a design point, a Servant Dumbrack, whoever, and said, design this for me, you spend $250,000. But when you submit that to the city, you're saying, this is where we want the roads, sewer and water, septic at the end of it. Because when that's approved, that goes to a Dexter or Atlantic Road. So what we say to a lot of clients is very few people can get into the pad ready road construction. That's a lot of money. Just don't finance it. But if you have the resources, look at the detailed paper. Because then if you sell that, the value exponentially goes up. Its value 4 is pad ready. And as you know, with pad ready is that means a builder can come in and pour a foundation. That's on a septic field, a drilled well, sewer and water. The streets are in, the sidewalks in, the street trees are in, all that. So the fourth value, the last value is if you actually build something. That you build that you can rent, lease, or put a mortgage on. But within this, these 5 values, raw land is simply not the land as is. There's values within them. So within these values, there's different levels of money, different levels of risk. You can make a lot of money. One of the things we always do is SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. So we always look for a threat first. I mean, if you can't deal with a threat, your project's in jeopardy. We want to make sure that's dealt with. Various projects along the way. You may have seen this. So Ganji Restaurant, Wise Road in Bolin, right here in this building, the existing apartment building. When we first got in this, the client hired us. He went and got the architect and did a design for 15-story building, which was this guy here. And the policy at the time would only allow 6. He spent $150,000. We had to break the bad news to him. There was no way he was getting 15,000. And he had planned to basically, this was a daycare, and he was going to basically tear the daycare down. He bought it, but there was a covenant that the daycare had to stay. And so all of his designs before he got involved had this daycare gone. So like basic research, restricted covenants, easements, like all of this, you would be maybe shocked and not shocked. People come to us and the money they spend. And there's a phrase I use, don't chase a parked car. You used to have a dog that chased a parked car. He wasn't quite right in the head, but anyway, don't chase parked cars. Like do your homework up front. Now this is one Isabel's, working on. It's fascinating. So if you go out to the Kent in the corner of Beaverbank and Sackville Drive, there's the big church. This is the old Ben's bakery. So this client, Ryan McNeil with Stonewater, talk about keeping your eyes open. Ryan was driving out there, great client, a long time. He got a phone call, so he pulled in his lot, and he looks down, and CBRE had the listing, but the sign had fell down. So as he's taking the call, he sees the sign, calls up the CBRE guy, and he says, "This thing's still for sale." He goes, "Yeah." He said, "Your sign's not even visible." $350,000. Right now, this is in for approval. We've got a lot of support, 50 units. In Sackville, for argument's sake, you get 40,000 a door. It's $2 million. Spent 350,000 to buy it, $100,000 to get it approved. We'll build it, but if you flip the paper, he'd probably pull in 2 million. That's the value of land and doing the research. When you may see when you go to Bedford Highway, Nick Stappis, Martin Eiser's right here. Tony Goshen's daycare is right there. This is now complete story. At the end of the day, great project, 8 stories, 55 units. All relied though was a issue with the intersection. The traffic lights are right there. Could have derailed the project. We worked it out. There's always something we look for in these projects, whatever land we've got. It's a classic one, 592 Bedford Highway. Here you've got the fish market. Jordanian client, smart guy, did a lot of development in the Middle East. And this design. Now that's not what Lyon Lynch is building. This would never get approved. He spent, I think, 140,000 on this, and he was going to in 2014. By the way, inside of this, 340 square foot condos. You don't have to be in the real estate market to realize at the bottom of Larry Utech 2014, nobody's buying a 340 square foot condo. However, that being the case, we got involved. We said, well, it's good news. We can get this approved. The bad news is this is garbage. Nice design and out it goes. But again, no, let's do the homework. It's Macintosh Estates we talked about earlier. So phase one that got sold to Clayton, again, 137,000 for a parcel and 309,000 home. Up here at phase three, in the part here will be about 180,000, 360,000. The rule of thumb, every builder that we have uses, whatever they pay for a lot, got to put a home on itself 4 times the price. Like, this is key. Always remember this. So if you see a lot out there, it's $100,000 or somebody's trying to sell it, our builders will say, multiply that by 4. And I actually sell minimum $400,000. So if you ever wonder why, for example, you're seeing being equal more development in Spryfield you are in Eastern Passage, is the lot prices could be the same, but they get $630,000 for a semi Cow Bay. Get that price. Remarkable when, this is an Egyptian client. Phase 4 is coming out. You see this cul-de-sac here. Nice looking cul-de-sac, faces the river. It's probably the best 15 lots. I said 3 years ago, watch, we'll get $200,000 per side or 400,000 for a parcel. There'll be an 800,000 semi. Say, Kev, get off the crack cocaine. $800,000. By the way, see this here? If anyone, I grew up in Arndale, the 500 block.
You point to the screen.
Oh, sorry. No problem. So the 500 block of apartments there.
Oh, that's the 500 block. Yeah.
So growing up in Arndale, that was basically, as you remember, a lot of an interesting activity took out there. Who would have ever guessed when we worked with the clients on this and they bought this in 2010, people thought they were crazy. Yeah. They got this for $1 million. At the end of the day, they'll gross 50 million, expenses 30, walk away with 20 million. And again, it's all vision, and this is all public. I mean, it's been all Nova Scotia. Clayton at a point could have bought this for 12 million. Buy it, because we grow up with prejudices. I'm an Arndale guy. I hated Spryfield. We always used to play sports against them, right? If you said this is probably one of the most successful projects in Halifax on an ROI, still a $600,000 home, even though that's top in this market, it's buyers. So again, you have to look past your prejudice, the land, what can it do for you? What's the real value per acre? So what can you do with it? So the land itself, to extent, is meaningless. Like, think about what you can do. And it always comes down to 2 factors is how many lots can you get to it? It could be 100 acres or 30 acres. So there's a project down in Indian Client, Chesapeake. Hard to imagine it got looked over right off the main, I think it's exit 19, 106 acres. Got picked over, not looked at, because you can look at a Google Earth at 50% wetlands. We said to the client, just do a wetland study. He was 50% was wetlands, but those wetlands were all from middle back. 50 acres was actually from the front out. Good. So they're going to build 4 50-unit apartment buildings. Can you imagine in Chesapeake? Be the first apartment building in Chesapeake, because people will drive, all because they did the research. So where everybody else bypassed, or they see a wetland. The project we're doing in Spryfield has a huge fish habitat. 20 acres, known as Lockwood Extension, but 10 acres is generally free and encumbered. So you move beyond that. If you do the research, you do the studies, which, Isabel and Jane will get into, there's always hidden, remove the biases. How many lots, how many apartment units? So around the city, you guys deal with this every day. You go to downtown Halifax, you might get 100,000 a door, 90,000. North End, you might get 70. Bedford, 50. Right now, the going rate in Spryfield we're seeing is 35,000 a door, and we're seeing a lot of projects happen. So, how many units can you get? How many lots? That's what an experienced developer is going to look at and say to you, at the end of the day, you might have 100 acres. This is what I can get on it. Or they'll buy it and you'll sell it for a client, a per acre value, give it to you and say, great, they're going to take it to somebody like us, get highest and best use and make more money. But knowing basically what the land you can do with it is key. We have a 20% rule. So a lot of times, you don't always have the time. We found in our experience, quick and dirty, if you take the total area of land in rural areas, take and chop off 20% of wetlands, steep slopes, side yards, rear yards, you're generally going to have 80% development. Sometimes that could be as low as 50, but 20% is a good, quick and dirty at the end of it. And so always think about not the land, what you can do today. And this is where most of our work is. People will come to us and say, what can I do with the zone I've got? What's the maximum in the zone as of right? But a lot of our business is, how can I find highest and best use? Is there a loophole? Is there something I haven't seen? Can I get through a rezoning, a development agreement, the suburban plan review that's going on?
Can you just explain the difference between as of right and highest and best use?
Sure. So as of right is every property has a current zone. But your R1, typically you're going to be allowed to have a single family house. Or if you have R3, maybe a multiple family fill or a C2 commercial. So that's what you could go in as of right, see a development officer, get a permit. There's no public or no council. Highest and best use means you got to go through a discretionary process that's not guaranteed. So the public will have a say, planning department is going to write a report, and council is going to make a final decision at a public hearing. Obviously, there's more risk with discretionary or highest and best use, but that's where you can also far better financial gain. That's part of too what the value realtor can do to the client, saying, hey, this is what you can do today as of right. There's processes out there that could give you the lift. As long as you know the risk.
And when you drive around neighborhoods, you see this signs that are this what's proposed in your neighborhood. That's going with the highest and best use,
Correct.
you know, so public opinion.
You got it. That's an HRM notification sign, and just telling you there's some process going on.
A month, but it stays up how long the process, but it stays up for.
It stays up till the application is decided upon.
Thank you.
I'm almost wrapped up, folks. So you're saying, oh, Chris, you left the slide in? So never assume. So I can say, we had our 20th anniversary. It was great to see some of you there recently. It was May 8th. I did in my speech outline like mistakes I've made, unbelievable. I'll just tell you two. First job I did, I'll appreciate this one. Back in 1987, just got to school. It was around Grand Lake, $45,000. Developer said, Kev, you did a great job. The $45,000, or basically we'll give you 2 lots. This is Grand Lake, 1987. Said to my father, that was a Newfoundlander, simple guy. So what do you think? Take the land on the water. Said, Dad, who the F is going out to Grand Lake? Going to Bedford was the country.
Yeah.
So years later, they're having anniversary, and my father said, in Newfoundland, when they call you boy, when he's like, my boy's done quite well, but I want to go back to it. And at this point, he said, yeah, whatever happened to those lots? He said, something happened. He said, some schmuck in Pittsburgh bought them. It was Sidney Crosby's 2 on Mont Vista. You know what they're worth. So by the time the tax came off, the 45,000 was 30. And then I thought, hey, I went to school for 5 years. I deserve to go to Hawaii. 1987, the dollar was worth 67 cents. 6 weeks in Hawaii, by the time I came back, it was 15,000. So my father said, geez, Kevin, I'm glad you went to school. 15,000 versus 1.6 million. You're a genius. Last but not least, so, never assume, I always put this one up. So I had a German client. The folks know who it is. Meeting the German client was great, and all this was down at the Drift. Trying to close deal, all of this, and we're out there. So I go to the washroom. Be simple, and I'm all done my business. I mean, would you think $200 million building, the bathroom door's locked? And I sat there and I said, listen, I can't believe this. It's locked, it's locked. So I start putting, and then I go back to 25 and I said, like, this is embarrassing. I gotta get back to this meeting. Like, the thing what happened. I was gonna put my shoulder into it. I said, Kev, don't do that. Like, whatever. So finally, I'm so embarrassed. Knocking, and then the hostess comes over, opens up the door, said, oh my God, what happened? She goes, well, Kev, it's an Audi. It wasn't pushing the door. I said, that's why they pay me the big bucks. And she looked at me and she goes, how's that going? So I've learned in this business, never assume. Monte Vista lots, stuff like this, and the stories I could tell you another day where I've screwed up, effed up and all that, but you do learn. But land will tell you everything you need to know. It has a story, its value. You just got to look around and listen to it. It'll always treat you well. Being the case, I'm going to pass you on to Jane. That's not lock herself in bath. Yeah, probably not.
So I'm Jane. I'm one of the planning managers at Siteline, and I'm just going to go over some of the policy framework that is relevant to Halifax Regional Municipality, which you will soon find out is very complicated. So first is the regional planning strategy. So this is kind of the overarching document for the entire region. These are, usually very broad, like kind of directing policies, kind of tells you how they want to grow in the rural areas versus the suburban areas versus the city center. It was originally created in 2006, and is currently going to be revised for 2031. So it's like a document that spans like 25 years. And generally policies in this cannot be amended, and they apply to all developments, whether it's, you know, an as of right development or a discretionary development. So an example of that, and most of them are pretty general, but there are some like specific ones that are important to keep a note of. So for example, there's a 20-meter buffer around all wetlands and water courses, that's implemented through the regional plan, and that applies to like all properties. And then I also included here our vision, for the vision statement, and this is kind of all of the policies within all of the community plans and land use bylaw, all kind of towards this guiding vision. So it's kind of to keep that in mind. The second, we have the land use bylaw, and this is like kind of the key document for what you can do today. So all of properties in HRM have been zoned, and those zones are kind of laid out in 21 different community land use bylaws. So I have the one for Dartmouth up here. There's also one for Halifax mainland and Cole Harbour and Bedford, and they all are, in some ways, a lot of them are very similar, but there are some differences, big differences between them. So you do have to interact with each land use bylaw separately. And yeah, these only show what you could do in that zone today. They don't show you potential that it could have. Yeah, and these are the only documents that development officer would reference. So they look at these, they're the people who give you your permit. So if it's not on that page, we'll approve it. Very black and white, very straightforward. Kind of complementary to that is the municipal planning strategy. So there's, again, 21 different municipal planning strategies, and these are community plans. So these show all of the policies that create those land use bylaw zones. And then they also have enabling policies for discretionary approvals and for, you know, things like DAs and development agreements, rezonings. These are what the planners run. So these are kind of more interpretive documents. They can kind of be manipulated, and that's kind of what our main roles are, is to kind of go through these documents and look for those loopholes or those opportunities in the policies, and kind of shut up. So if you don't like what you see in the land use bylaw or the municipal planning strategy, the only way to kind of amend that is through a site-specific plan amendment. And this is a very lengthy and not guaranteed process, but it is an opportunity where you can kind of go outside of the realm of what a municipal planning strategy is and what's in the land use bylaw. But yeah, that's kind of a very long process, that can give you more creativity, I guess. Then there's also the subdivision bylaw. So this is just general provisions about what the city allows in terms of, you know, size of lots or the amount of frontage, length of streets, very like general requirements. And these are reviewed by development officers on all applications. So again, they apply to all of the property. And again, it's very technical and not very interpretive.
You still want to be a developer?
In addition to all those technical documents, we also have these secondary planning strategies. And these are kind of they're not policies, so they're not like enforceable by the municipality, but they are, they were created to kind of guide new development, and guide the future of Halifax. So we have like the Halifax, which is acting on climate change, rapid transit strategy, the green network plan. And these can really be useful in terms of what the future property value of a property could be. For example, when we did the Housing Accelerator Fund, which I will talk about later, they really focused on where the sites for the rapid transit stations were going to be. It's not implemented yet. That's not approved yet. That's not have a rapid transit system yet. Where they've already planned that, so they're already thinking about what properties are going to need to have extra density to meet the needs of that rapid transit strategy. And similarly, like for the Halifax Green Network Plan, if there are issues if there's a property that's interesting, but it's highlighted in this as places that they want to protect for environmental sensitivity, that's probably a major like barrier or problem area.
Those available
Yes, yeah, these are all public documents, yeah, and there's actually a couple other, I think, secondary planning strategies I didn't include. But it's all on the HRM website. These maps are also public information, and these are other things that you could consider when looking at a property. So this one on the right here is areas of archaeological potential. So as you can see on the Halifax Peninsula, it's a very old city. There's a lot of interesting sites. So there's potential for archaeology there. It's just important to know because if you do find anything of archaeological significance, you have to like stop everything and do a whole review of that site. So knowing where those sites are kind of early, or doing an initial archaeological kind of overview can really give you a good sense of if there's anything important that you actually need to be addressing. And here I have the provincial landscape viewer. And so on this, you can see protected areas, protected species, and like wetlands, watercourses. This isn't great data. There's obviously, it's pretty good. Anything on here is like definitely a wetland, but there could be other wetlands that are not on here do exist. But it's just kind of, it's good to know if it's not on here, it's probably really bad.
Like get updated. How, if we were to look at it, we assume it's 6 months out, or it's just.
This is an active map, interactive map, so it's the data is kind of live. These ones haven't been, archaeological maps haven't been updated since the regional plan was created. So that you can super rely on that, but it's still good to, if it's been flagged by them, they will require it. If it's and if it's not flagged, you can say it's not flagged. I don't have to do this. Finally, I'm going to talk about the upcoming plans and policy changes. And this again is another opportunity where you can find a lot of extra value for the property. So right now, obviously those 21 convoluted planning documents is not ideal. HRM knows that. So they're working to standardize and modernize. Also, a lot of those plans were written in the 90s, some of them even in the 80s. Doesn't really apply to today's current situation. So they're attempting to standardize and modernize through regional plan review and the suburban plan review. And so recently they did the Housing Accelerator Fund updates, where they kind of upzoned a lot of areas, kind of, and we had a lot of applications in for that. I think something like 68 different applications we submitted. Not all of those were approved, but a lot of them, you know, we did get some really key sites that it was exciting to see go from a single family home to, you know, a 5-story building now. So that's like definitely a huge increase in value. The suburban plan review is kind of ongoing right now. So we've also submitted engagement for that. And if you have like a potential site or an interesting opportunity, you can like submit through that and they'll consider that when they're building their suburban plan. So that's a really interesting, just where we're entering an area of change. It's a good time to kind of get that extra value from the land if you have a good parcel. The regional plan review, yeah, that's kind of we're doing that whole overarching document, and that'll be up in 2031. Their upcoming plans, they are looking at the rural plan review. They haven't officially started that yet, but that is noted by a lot of the HRM planners that that's coming. The Housing Accelerator Fund, at some point, they're probably going to review that center plan, because there's a lot of changes that happened to HAF. They're going to start reviewing that, make sure like as these things roll out that there's significant density there. Someone writing? Was that me? I don't know.
I don't know how that is happening.
It's a ghost.
Okay.
Well, it's really
Hey. So I also just want to bring up how, you know, what we do and how we can kind of help you navigate this crazy amount of information. So we have 3 different kind of offerings that we do. The planning brief, and this is kind of a shorter document. It'll tell you what we'll go through, like as of right situation, see what's available today, and like with the Housing Accelerator Fund, maybe that's different than what it was 2 years ago. We'll confirm what the zone and its limitations, and we'll look at some of the property features, some of those wetlands, some of those, if it's on a bus rapid transit route or if it's near parks or schools, we'll look at some of the property features and kind of a nice letter on information of what you could do today. The letter of planning opinion is where we get into all of the nitty gritty of the policies and what you could do and what we would recommend you do for the highest and best use. We'll talk about what it is today, what it could be, and what steps you're going to have to take to get there. And we'll also talk to the HRM staff and confirm that these pathways are correct and they're available and they're in accordance with what HRM is thinking. Yeah, and we also will include some massing, and I'll show you that in the next slide. Just kind of gives you or your client or an HRM an idea of what proposal is. So this is what it will look like, what it looks like today, and what it could look like with a discretionary approval. Planning inquiry letter is our last one, and that's really for experienced developers or our current clients. And that's kind of just a confirmation of they have an idea or a project. They already really understand the land. We're not going to talk about that. We're just going to answer their question and confirm whether what they're planning is viable and an option. And we'll talk to HRM staff for that as well and get their confirmation.
And just a quick question about how that, so what your offerings are, which are amazing. I think I participated in the planning group. Which was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It made me look amazing. However, I want to know how it compares to like the basic paper, the detailed paper. Do they vary up naturally in terms of what you offer compared to talking about like the $5,000 good investment? Where does that land in terms of your offerings, or does it?
Yeah. So the letter of planning opinion is usually what we would say is like the kind of, I guess, the basic paper. So that's like, it's a full report and we go into a lot of the detail there, and we'll show you how you can get to the highest and best use through that. Someone's still waiting. Oh, someone's in the chat.
Sonia. Any?
Do we have pricing between the different tiers? Yes. I don't know how to go back. How do I go back? Oh yeah, I've had that. Yeah. So yeah, we do have a tiered system in terms of pricing for each of these. So this would be like the least expensive because it provides the least detail, and the letter of planning opinion would be the most expensive because it's the most detail. And the planning group is kind of right there in the middle. And yeah, so this would kind of match up with the basic paper because it is. I'll show you what you can do today and what you could do, and we will do some deeper dives into the policies, and we'll be bringing that with the HRM staff.
Just to put this into a little bit of context for everyone. So Luke is working on a triplex on Pleasant Street. And our market analysis tells us that it's going to be worth between $650, $700, $700,000. It's going to take 90 to 100 days for this project to sell. So I think we're getting the PIL, which is not really a significant amount of money, all grand scheme of things. What will come back from that will tell us the as a rent. But then what happens is, when it comes back, it may not move needle too much on price. Like if it comes back and says it's a triplex and it can only be a triplex, well, okay, we spent a few $100 is what it is, we know the answer. But now it comes back and says actually has a right, it can be an 8-plex or 10 units. Suddenly, I don't want to share how much we're spending because I don't know, you can, but now we have like significant piece of paper here that tells somebody this specific triplex gets terrible rents. So it's going to be hard to sell it for $650,000 or $700,000. Now with PIL, Luke's going to be able to attach it to his listing and say, hey, potential developers, yes, we have a triplex, but we have a PIL here that says that you can build an 8-plex on this gorgeous unit on Pleasant Street. And so now, not only does it increase the value for our clients are super happy, but also we make more money. And it will dramatically shrink our sales cycle. So what should take probably 90 to 120 days to sell, it'll probably sell in 4 weeks. And so now it's value add all around. We make more money, our clients make more money, we shrink that sales cycle so we can keep moving on, and then of course they spread the word. So it's just doing these little types of things that can really add a lot of value to your clients, and that's just one real life example that we're currently using right now.
That's a great example,
Yeah.
to say, Bill, that,
Yeah.
you know, that you get, our stamp on it, but anytime we get anything from HRM, it's also in writing.
Yeah.
So, everyone trusts HRM, don't trust them.
Yeah.
So basically that's attached. They physically see that we do our own internal analysis and we say to HRM, do you agree with this? And an email comes back, that's part of a report. And so the client could say,
Yeah.
that's on municipal email or letter.
Well, Phil, the client paid for this, right? It's not,
I think each particular case, I don't know if we're paying 100, we're going 50/50 or what's going on there, but
they want.
want to pay for it, so they want to own it. So then we'll allow them to pay for it, but in this particular case, the PIL isn't like such a large amount of money that listing agent wouldn't feel comfortable. Need to spend a lot more money on my listing, let's just say. So it wouldn't be something that, it's not a point that is
Right.
like,
Scary.
it's as much as photos or
Right.
staging.
I think like when I stage a vacant home, I split that $3,000 with the client. So something like this, I would probably split with the client, like I believe in it. I want you to believe it, and we're both invested in this now together.
Right.
It's not $3,000.
And really what we try and do with these letters too is provide some really solid rationale as to why we're giving these recommendations and give some general information that's very easy to follow. And break down these plans, these
Yeah.
bylaws, the regional plan, and really make it digestible for the client. And then they understand. So they really understand where all these value are really coming from, all the different whether it be it's on a bus rapid transit line and adding 5 stories now on along here road. We just want them to follow, the thought process, and then they have that.
I'll say as well, like with these new changes that are happening, the Housing Accelerator Fund especially, like a lot of properties in the peninsula went from, single family homes only forever to being like, oh, you can have 8 units there. And so even just confirmation that these policies are now in effect and that they're happening and that applies to your property, because there are some that like it doesn't apply to still. But for most of them, it's like a huge increase. Yeah.
Before Jane wraps up, 2 real quick examples. Chris is working on one. Our 2 lots service 5,000 square feet, Macintosh Street, Thrive compliant. Then pull everything lines up. There's no wetlands. Want to build a duplex. So split it down the middle, 2,500. Seems straightforward. A little research, Chris. Say Halifax water easement running right down path. So Chris is going to determine. We still think we can squeeze in a single family, but that client was about to jump out and pay for architectural drawings. At the end of it, and you may have heard this in Nova Scotia. A realtor, not sure who, that it was a doggy care business in Dartmouth, and doggy care was allowed by zoning. Person bought it, it was an industrial building, it's like $1 million. Kennel cans. The realtor assumed doggy care, the kennel. The zone specifically said no kennels. It's ugly. I don't know what happened with this, but the woman that bought it, the realtor bought it for the care, the overnight kennel. Makes sense. Going on vacation, the kennel's not permitted. So these are the things we make sure, like what you said, Bill, is triplex, is there opportunities for 8 because of the accelerator fund? Then
Yeah. And then here, this was just an example massing. This was done by our architectural and design coordinator, Anna. And so this is like the existing situation, and then you just, it's very basic. It's not an architectural drawing, but it does give you a sense of like what this looks like in the context of other buildings around it, and that can just be a nice visual for the client, and be a nice visual for the municipality, and even the public, if you wanted to do a kind of discretionary approval. Yeah, so that's everything I have to say, and I'm going to hand it over to Isabel.
Thanks, Jane. So yeah, my name is Isabel, and I'm going to talk about the importance of the foundational studies for land development. So we talked a lot about the discretionary planning approval process. So if you want to do something in HRM that's beyond the as of right capabilities of the site, you basically have a list of requirements from HRM of what has to be submitted so that they can review everything and they can determine whether or not they will support either the rezoning for a different use, the increased density, minor variance, or whatnot. So these key foundational studies are really the starting point for developing land. And they really allow for engineers, architects, planners, developers to understand that true potential, as Kevin and Jane have talked about. It's a little bit more complicated than what you might see just in an aerial imagery on viewpoint or driving past a property. So it really helps people make informed decisions knowing all of this information. So first one, I'm sure everyone is familiar with. It is a plan of survey. So this shows the legal property boundaries, any homes that are existing on the property, right-of-ways, the easements. But what you may not be as familiar with is the importance of adding the topography to the plan of survey. So this adds so much more value to this plan. It gives you so much more information. And it really helps you understand those developable areas. So it can help you identify any potential challenges, like steep slopes, wetlands, and you can know this very early on in the process. So this is an example here of a property in Musquodoboit Harbor. This is a screen grab from Viewpoint. This here is the survey plan. And this is the survey plan with topography. So these are 1 meter contours, very details. Yeah, a little different. I don't know if I can go back. A little different here on this. You can see where the contour lines are close together. That indicates some steep slopes. So this could be difficult for building a road network or near impossible to build an actual building on this area. Over here, you have the lines that are more spaced out. That indicates the flatter areas. So that could indicate a very good, suitable place for buildings, but that could also indicate where water is pooling on the site and there could be wetlands there. So it's still only one piece of the puzzle, but really an experienced developer could look at this and decide whether or not the site is worth investing further funds into to do additional studies. So it's a really great starting point. And that brings me to the next study I wanted to talk about. So it is the wetland and watercourse delineation study. Basically identifies all the wetlands and watercourses present on a site. And this is done through a desktop analysis and some field work as well. Wetlands are protected by the Nova Scotia Wetland Conservation Policy. So in order to infill or alter them, it has to be approved by Nova Scotia Department of Environment.
It's an excruciating process. It's incredibly expensive. I did it for 19,000 square feet of Main Street, Dartmouth. Year and a half. Pay 150,000 before we finish. Pay $9 a square meter. Have it, the wetland done somewhere else to mitigate. Yeah.
Yeah, to offset.
Unless it's an incredibly good piece of land. I suggested to you, if you want to live a long, prosperous life. Get away from dealing with the environment.
Do the wetland
I'm very
study
serious
before
about
you buy
that.
the property.
We're
Yeah.
hunting these guys to get.
Yeah, so there are some preliminary things that you can look at, like Jane alluded to, with the provincial mapping that doesn't always show the full picture, but again, it could be something that you really quickly take a look at. Maybe it could save you big headache down the line. So speaking about that process, it also requires an in-season surveying of the wetlands, so that can only be done June to September. So that's another constraint that can push the timelines very far, as you mentioned. And they basically want to assess the ecological value of the wetlands. We'll put a price on the square footage of infilling it. And they also want to see a site concept plan that shows that you made an effort to void wetlands in the first place. So it's not an easy process or something that they necessarily encourage. But then there comes the HRM land policy as a layer on top of that. So HRM has their own policy and it indicates that a contiguous wetland cannot be infilled. Also has a 20-meter buffer is applied to that. So no construction can be put in the buffer.
Continuous wetlands, so but
All,
not like a spot.
Yeah.
Wetlands, it's one big. wetland.
Exactly.
Habitat.
and I'll show an example here of what that looks like exactly. So this is a property in East Preston, very large property, not very far from Dartmouth. And this is the results of their wetland study. So, yeah, as you can see, there's a huge wetland on the property. This blue line is a watercourse. The watercourse connected to a wetland is the contiguous wetland. And that means there's a 20-meter buffer. So nothing can be built within these pink lines and you cannot infill it.
So what's the point? Imagine if you put this on the market, you're selling it at 65 acres.
And you're seeing this.
I'd be more concerned. Representing the buyer on property of that and not doing the due diligence. Because as a seller, it's the responsibility of the buyers to do their due diligence. But to your point on the $1 million doggy daycare, like, so where we get ourselves in trouble if we don't work with people like Siteline. Clients spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if we don't do basic due diligence, they find that the land is used.
Yeah.
To follow that through, if we have a buyer, say we're looking at a property like this, we don't have this view, and we come to Siteline and say, hey, we need more information. Hopefully, if we needed something like this, how much is that as an investment for either us, the agent, or our buyer?
We'll send all this over to Alicia. So to Jane's earlier one, we have these priced out, exact detail. I'll also show you an example.
Really,
So you can look at like an inquiry letter, an opinion letter, and a brief. You can match it up. And so in the future, if you have a client,
Yeah.
we're very comfortable saying, that's what I need, that's the place.
Yeah.
So after today, we'll send that all over to Alicia
really
and you'll have it.
'cause
Yeah,
that is
and
worth its weight right there.
We could compile some estimates because, so we work with McCallum, now Strum. So it does depend on, again, the size of the property that they have to survey. If you want to do a preliminary desktop analysis, that could be really useful as well. They don't necessarily have to do the field work. There's certain sites where we'll even talk to them and they'll say, site will cost the same amount actually, or very close to the same amount to do just the desktop versus the field work, maybe if it's a smaller site. So in that case, they can point you in the right direction to what's appropriate for the land, but we can kind of compile some different price
Check with you
estimates.
guys, then we-
The McCullen bought it, on Strum.
Yeah.
And they're the best in wetland elimination.
McCallum is, I think, the best, whether it's strong. This is a prime example, why commercial is so different than residential. We would always put a due diligence date of 90 to 120 days. Very seldom do our land deals close following month or whatever. The due diligence, I would put subject to wetland delineation. One thing I put now is subject to endangered species, because there's a couple of trees out there now.
Yes.
And they want 60-meter buffers before. So that's a huge difference. And when I deal with residential agents, I say, forget your closing at the end of the month. It ain't gonna happen. And the only fair way to deal with your customer is the due diligence. If you don't know what you're talking about, pass it on, believe me. Because I've been in it for a good many years. It can take it so far. You know how to read a zone, but when it gets a certain level, I hand it over to these guys because they can dig in behind. If you figure you know everything about this business, get it.
Already lined
Hire
up, so.
fire experts, but that's the biggest difference. It's the due diligence period, you gotta spread it out. And if the seller, your buyer, or your seller says, no, I wanna close in 30 days, it ain't gonna happen.
Well, that's a great example. We did one out in Enfield. It cleared every hurdle, wetlands, and the very last thing we did, we found was an endangered wood turtle. I never even knew.
You knew.
End of story. Good night, it was a wood turtle habitat, game over.
I had the endangered black oak spruce or something on that Arrowhead lands I sold,
Yeah.
the value in half. They took up 60 acres with the buffer zone, so. It's not for the faint, this development business, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, and so this one over here too is for 700 acres. This one was a desktop analysis because it was so big and they did find some boreal felt lichen. But it just so happened to be in a location that they could completely avoid. Again, could have turned out differently, so. And that really is not completely uncommon for rural Nova Scotia properties to be very, very heavy on the wetlands. So obviously, if you're developing a parking lot on Sackville Drive, you don't need a wetland study, but in rural areas, even if you don't see a water course or you don't see water, there still could be a wetland there. They look at different species present, they look at different soil and the water table as well to actually determine if the wetlands are there or not. So it's a little bit more complicated than just walking the site.
Different classes of wetlands as well, there's 4 different classes.
And then, so this one shows the different type. So these ones here are isolated wetlands, not contiguous. There's no river that goes through them. So this property, this one could be applied for infill, but again, it would be at the discretion of Nova Scotia Environment if they approve that or not, and there would be a cost per square meter. There are different classes, that's the ecological value. So that would be STRUM that can describe basically how much it should be priced at to replace that in a different location.
You're buying a fish in a wetland, right?
Yes, fish habitat. Fish habitat, that's the most significant. So you cannot infill those at all. So that would not be approved.
Can't kill turtles.
It would look good in all of Scotia.
So those studies are very important for rural areas, raw land. This study here, a traffic impact study, is relevant to rural and urban land. It's basically evaluating the effects of a proposed development and identifying if there's any really big traffic issues already present in the community, and what upgrades would be necessary to actually support proposed development. So this gives HRM some more information, and they typically do require some level of this study be done. The traffic impact study is the most extensive. So for a master plan community, a very extensive traffic study would be needed before they can decide at all if they're going to support it or not. And then there's also a intermediate study, traffic impact statement, and this would be for less intensive development. And then there's also a traffic impact letter, which can be done by an engineer that basically looks at maybe a situation where there's proposed addition of 5 to 10 units. And they can say, yes, I've looked at this and this would not add a significant drain to the current transportation network. And then HRM has that confirmation, but they don't need to worry about the traffic impact.
How long do some of these studies take? Probably months.
So it does depend, but the traffic engineer that we really like to work with, he can do a pretty good turnaround. Yeah, about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the scope. Some of the really extensive traffic studies could take 2 months. And sometimes there's also a little bit of back and forth with HRM, depending on the scale of the project.
To your question, if we get a lot of work in diligence period of agreements to sales, so we kind of give those a priority.
Okay.
But really one quick example here, which with Isabel, so my brother-in-law, recent brother-in-law, out in Green Hill, West Hants, 7 or 8 acres. He had 3 lots for him and his family. He sold 3 lots. The folks went to get the building permit, and get the building permit, because transportation would approve it, we're around a hill.
Like,
And this is a brother-in-law,
Yeah.
so now the 3 folks that bought it, I mean, this is ugly. So the only way we can work around it, we brought out a traffic engineer, ARL, Jeff LeBlanc is brilliant. If we get them to lower the speed limit, 80 to 70, it softens the curve, meets the requirement, because when people pull out, you gotta be able to see them or pull in. Gotta get that reduced, or this is gonna get ugly, because he sold 3 lots. Well, there was nothing on the lots, but it's the building permit. So at the end of the day, our traffic guy believes the argument is there, but what a mess.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen some projects go to a later planning stage, without some of these foundational studies, and then as Kevin mentioned in some of his earlier examples too, you have to halt your project, you have to go back, do these foundational studies, and then your density might be significantly reduced. You might have to change where you've sited some buildings. And in like the most extreme cases, the developer may abandon the project because it's actually not viable. So there is value to doing these foundational studies, and sometimes it's just about choosing which studies to prioritize. Sometimes you have to do them all. Well, for the last one that I'm going to talk about today is the groundwater assessment. So this is mostly for the rural communities or any community or any property that's not connected to municipal infrastructure like water or sewer. So it basically outlines the quality and the quantity of groundwater available. This is very important to determine if it's suitable for on-site septic or drilled wells. Again, in those areas where you cannot access municipal services. This could really limit the density permitted on the site if you cannot provide enough water. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And there's basically the level 1, that's a preliminary study, and that'll determine if you need a level 2, which is a more extensive study. So these are really the foundations. It's only the beginning. As I'm sure you all know, development is a very long, arduous process, but those studies really do serve as the basis for all the detailed design work that the engineers do afterwards, that the architects do, and that would make up the final package submitted to HRM planning. So this is just a little quick example of how those foundational studies could be turned into an engineering concept plan. And then you can see there's some blocks of townhouses here, or water management pond. And then it would be turned into a landscaping plan by the landscape architects. And then it would go on and on and on, and the renderings. And yeah, lots more work to do. Okay, now Chris is gonna talk about his GIS now.
Kevin, I gotta apologize. I got a play date with my grandkids, so I gotta
See you,
go.
my friend.
They both graded, so Grandpa's gotta look. Take care.
Yeah, I know we're running up against the clock a little bit, so I'll try to keep this brief. I'm just gonna talk about the value of geographic information systems for land development. So geographic information systems, or GIS, is basically just digital mapping. So we use a combination of data sets from both the city and the province generally, to basically distill the important information about a property and see what we can see before diving into those background studies, because a lot of the time we can get a lot of the information we need just from the open source data. So this map was for a property that we had rezoned. It's on Cherry Lane in Spryfield. So red dotted line around the edge is the notification area. So those were all the dwellings that had to be notified through the rezoning process. And part of like the planning strategy that Jane had kind of talked about earlier was that the enabling policy, one of the things they had to meet was that it had to be like consistent with the neighborhood and stuff like that. So this map kind of shows what else is on the ground there. So I used open source data from city, and they had like number of dwelling units in each home. And I color coded those basically, and it gives you like a really good sense of exactly what's going on around it. So you can see that there are a lot of apartment buildings already existing. So it really is consistent with like the neighborhood to turn this single family home into an apartment building. And yeah, there's like little commercial areas and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm a big believer in using maps as like a tool to like tell a story, and stuff like this really like lets you know, it gives you a visual sense of like what's going on the ground in the neighborhood.
City, GIS information are using is, I use Explorer HRM.
I use the like HRM open source data catalog. So a lot of the stuff that's on Explore HRM is also through that. You can just download it and like manipulate it yourself. And then they also have some data sets that are not on there too. So yeah, I think they have the buildings on Explore HRM, like you can see where the buildings are. You also have like a matching data set on the open source catalog that has all the building information. So like the uses and like number of units and stuff like that. Yeah, I kind of like combine those two and then this. This is a map that we did for the Port Authority. They were curious about how much of the center plan area, so which is like the peninsula and then Vermouth inside the cirque, how much of that area was covered by periodic slate. So I got that data from the Nova Scotia, like I got it from the Nova Scotia Department of Environment, basically. And basically combine that with like the data set from the city to show the HRM center plan area. Then yeah, basically just showed exactly where all the British slate is. So that's like the Canard Formation, it says in the legend there. Canard Formation is just like the formation of British slate that goes through the city, basically. So yeah, if you were building in the center plan, you could like use a map like this to show or to see if you're going to be dealing with verdict slate really quickly, because that's going to be a huge burden on your development. It's good to know that as quickly as possible. You want to know that early on in the development process. And
Last thing you're gonna have to do is that.
Well, to Chris's point, why that's ugly, British slate's got that bad bacteria. But everything you dig up, slow down to Fairview.
Treat it.
Read it, so you might have development costs. You're in that area, Chris shows, all that material, it's gotta be transported, your development costs go through the roof.
Did you say you have to treat that to get?
No, you have to actually put it in a truck and then dump it into Mine Bedford. The
Oh.
Fairview facilities.
Gotcha.
The whole yellow area is considered.
No, what's shocking until Chris,
I think it wasn't.
Yeah.
well, until Chris did this, what was shocking is we've done 3 studies for the Port Authority and their whole job is to take periodic slate. Didn't know where it was.
Okay.
So anyway, I told them it took me 30 hours to do this map and they believe me.
you have a data source right here. So it's from the geological bedrock information on the Nova Scotia RNA. So again, it's just open source data through the government. Right? Just manipulating it in different ways and combining data sets helps you they figure out a lot of information about their property.
Base knowledge for GIS, you know how Viewpoint has the property lines? It's like, yeah, it's that information overlaid on it.
Yeah, that is like the best example of like GIS that like nobody really knows what it is, but everyone knows Viewpoint, and that's yeah, it's a really good example of it. It's basically just combining like maps and data and information. So you like click on it, see all the information on it. It's like that, but
Florida has all like the phosphorus, like HRM on property, and then it's just property.
it's an awesome tool. So this is another property that we did. This was about 600 acres. And I used for this one provincial LiDAR data. So how provincial LiDAR works is they basically flew planes over the entire project or province and scanned all of the ground with lasers, basically. So yeah, you can access all that information online through the Nova Scotia data catalog. If it's in HRM, they actually have even better LiDAR. It's like more accurate. So this one, I got that LiDAR data and you can manipulate it to do a bunch of different stuff. So you can do like contour lines, but for this one, I wanted to specifically show the slope percentage. So when you're developing properties, generally over 30% is going to require like 30% slope is going to require major excavation. So that's kind of what we wanted to highlight early on. This is definitely not as accurate as a topographic survey. you can like highlight stuff really, really early on, that's gonna be an issue. So if there was a lot of these red areas, we know it's gonna be a big problem before the surveyors even get there, which saves a lot of money, especially on like a 600-acre parcel like this. So this would have taken me like an hour or two, and to get the whole property topographic survey, months, and yeah, tons of money. Yeah, you can I would say about like this kind of data, you can get to know really, really quickly. You can't necessarily get to yes. So like just because it's not showing a slope on here, doesn't mean that there aren't gonna be slopes that are gonna be a problem when you do like a survey or something like that. But if there is like a high slope percentage on this data, probably there. You can pretty much see that.
Where did you say this information came from? What data?
This one came from, it's GeoNova is the name of the website.
GeoNova.
Yeah, if you just Google GeoNova LiDAR, you come up.
So this property is not an HRF.
Exactly, yeah.
Probably just gonna hire you guys, I'm a nerd. Nerd about it.
Yeah, it's really,
The HRM LiDAR is more accurate. If you're in HRM, you use the HRM one, and then there is still provincial data for outside of HRM.
yeah. So provincially, they do like 30-meter pixel sizes, which basically means like, when you're measuring the slope percentages on here, it's gonna be in like 30-meter chunks, basically. Whereas in HRM, they have like up to 1 meter chunks, so it's much more accurate. A survey is gonna be millimeters, so, yeah.
I love that everything's in terms of this is going to save money down the road. If we do this piece instead of that other piece. I love how cost conscious that is. I think that's amazing. You guys have that.
It's about identifying the big problems as early as possible, right?
Right,
So-
so you don't have to go down the path, it's gonna be prohibitive. Or you're fully aware going down the path, exactly what you potentially are running into, and you're hearing about it right away, so you can build for it.
Yeah,
And that leads perfectly into my next
And
slide.
you're welcome.
Maybe not, I'll just jump to that one just because we were just talking about it. This is a property kind of close to Peggy's Cove. So you can see like the road is down on that side, and they had this long strip, and they owned all this land on this lake up here. So what they were thinking is they would access from the road and develop up here into like a residential neighborhood. But yeah, we pulled up this wetland comes from like the Nova Scotia hydrographic network. So like the light blue lines are just like rivers and streams. Light blue like polygons are swamps. And then like the dark blue polygons are lakes. So you can kind of see their entire access point is covered by a swamp and a lake. And not only is it covered by a swamp and a lake, because sometimes you can get that infilled because it's not connected to anything on here. But the green parcel is actually like a provincially protected wildlife area. The swamp extends into there. And you can identify that right away. You're not gonna be able to touch that ever.
you don't need to go do the wetland study.
Yeah, so
That's all you need to know.
they got a quote for a wetland study, and it was $30,000 just to identify the wetlands, and we just kind of told them, don't do that. Yeah, exactly. So now that the owner is trying to find a workaround, he's definitely not gonna be going through that way.
Yeah, and maybe that means buying a neighboring property, right, that provides him an access, but now he knows to go down that route instead of doing the wetland study.
Then still needing.
And then.
Paying $30,000 and still needing to buy your property.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's important to say, because your guys' team works with all of the engineering groups, so. Can stop it before you spend the $20,000, $30,000, you're like, yeah, $150,000 and say.
Yeah.
Nope, I wouldn't go any further.
You know what's scary? This client before he came to us, he's been acquiring land, he spent 750,000 feet. We come to Chris and us ahead of time.
But said no.
And the thing is, it's like engineers are great at their job, but they don't look at the big picture of things, and they'll go and they'll take your $30,000 and do a really good job. But they won't know to tell you, you don't need this.
Trying to get through $30,000, probably get a big picture like you got there.
Yeah, and like the people who were doing the wetland study, they have access to this information too. This is all open source. They know where to find it. they'll take your money anyway, to do the study. So, yeah, we like identified this as a part of like a planning brief, which is like one of our lower level documents too. So like pretty good value for money for the client.
But he can save himself $800,000.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that increases the value of our relationship with our clients to be able to have that knowledge and bring it out, say,
Yeah,
let's do this step.
yeah, it takes the guesswork out.
It's incredible.
For desktop studies, when they're doing a wetland delineation, what they'll do is like take this provincial water courses that are already mapped, and they'll use that and a combination of like the LiDAR for the slope, figure out where the runoff is gonna be and where it's like most likely to like have like low-lying wetlands based on like where there is mapped water and then like the slopes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of like their lower level version of like a wetland study is like a combination of those two things. Tried to recreate it and I haven't been able to.
You're missing a secret ingredient.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
almost there.
Yeah, so this one is an example of some properties that we submitted for a client to the suburban plan process. So the suburban plan was kind of prioritizing rapid transit bus routes and increasing density on those bus routes. So what we did was we mapped out all the properties. They're all on Herring Cove or just off of Herring Cove, and found all the bus stops, which are the gray bus stops, and then found their proposed rapid transit terminals, which are the green ones. So those were all available through HRM Open Data. And then they also have in the inset map right here, you can see that those are like the walk shed areas. So those are areas that they have deemed like close enough to walk to a rapid bus station. So they're walking distance from a bus station, so want to increase density in those areas. This map it is a lot going on, and that's kind of by design because there's so much transit going on. It's like overwhelming to look at, which is kind of like they wanted. Yeah, we were able to show that it met like their criteria, and all of these properties that we're showing here were then picked up in the suburban plan and then accelerated through the housing accelerator program, and they're now zoned HA, and they have 5 stories, whereas they were all single family homes before. These will probably all be developed fairly soon.
The value of those,
Put that in perspective, a lot of these clients have like a $500,000 house. 5 stories, average 80 units, 35,000 a door, 2.5 million. We've had clients go out and buy a house with paper. Now they got 2.5 million.
and the seller has no idea. Realize you're sitting on a $2.5 million property, and I think you're sitting on a $500,000 value.
That again is where some of those secondary planning documents that Jane mentioned, like the rapid rapid transit strategy, actually comes into play there. It's been a strategy that's been on the HRM website for a few years now. Now they're actually starting to implement that. So it does give you a bit of a look into the future.
And you being able to tell your clients what not to expert. Are you for $12,000?
Yeah. That's pretty much all I had for you guys today. Thanks for having us. This is a picture of our whole team.
Like sleeves or mastermind in the middle, you got your skill set.
Well, this is an interesting team. So on our team, so Anna, originally from Manila. Far left. Well, Caleb, originally from Hawaii. Laura's from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And we've got St. John's, Dartmouth, I don't hold that against Chris, and Halifax. So a little bit over everything, but. So I wanted to leave also a little bit of good news. So we consider Phil and Sina friends of the company. So our rates are consistent across the board because we generally don't want a client going to something, but we do have legacy clients. These are clients who are the longest time, the oldest. So anybody from Keller Williams or your clients come to us, any of the fees that we're about to send over to Alicia, you get our premium legacy discount at 25%.
Wow.
So we'll put that when you get the pricing, you'll see the pricing, and then you'll see the Keller Williams we can treat as a legacy client. What that will mean in some cases is that the planning brief, the discount will be very close to inquiry letter.
Wow.
So you may in some cases save for the bit of a difference of a few $100. Better thing.
Let's take the next
And
step.
if you're used to spending money on staging and photos and drone shots and all this stuff, where pricing is not outrageous. So it's always worth the inquiry.
The last thing we do too is we call Chris many names, magician of maps and all that, but he's also a screener. So we have some clients for per hour value, 150. If you have something in there, you send it over to Chris. Sometimes he can take a look, hour or two. Say, you know what, like I give you an example, a client zone of death nature, it's called a holding zone. Like, you can't do anything with it. We find that out. And by the way, we do a quick screen and end up going further in it, gets discounted off price. But again, if you want a quick look on something, you can send it to Chris. Chris can do a screen for you on certain occasions. Sometimes, like you're talking Phil and Luke about the 3 triplex. That's obvious. You're trying to file out, a inquiry letter. We do it. Every once in a while, you'll come across a few. Feel free to send those to Chris. If you want to look at it for again, a couple hours per hour, you can get a quick screen.
Couple comments in the chat. Online.
Just look at a survey in Prospect Bay that has a right of way through the house. So this makes sense. Survey is recent. House looks like it's in the middle of.
It's a perfect example of what we can do for a planning increase. Answer a specific question just like this.
Yeah.
I'll like send it in an email.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was trying to unmute myself on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, yeah, so I could send that copy, but apparently somebody else said that, oh, that's pretty normal. And even if you look at it on Viewpoint, you can see the lines that we were talking about earlier are right through the house.
Then Prospect Bay has a right of way through the house.
Yeah.
Interesting. We're definitely sending you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely send it to Kevin Steve.
Sometimes, guys, there's different easements. So sometimes you have an easement that can go free to a lake. Work around those. You run into an easement like Halifax Water. It's not good because they have the right to go in and tear down your house. It goes like a water main. So easements in
Oh.
themselves, depending on what type of easement you run into, be problematic or really not good. So
Or like a construction easement would be temporary. So.
an example.
I can tell you right now that if you send that to us, we'll be able to give you our opinion, but licensed Nova Scotia land surveyor should be consulted for like any determining.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't-
And I,
Can't make any calls on legal surveys.
It's the preliminary.
Share this slide, so like in case, supply, try to basically educate on how important it is to,
Yeah.
especially during the redevelopment, maybe some for land or something like that. It will convince them, I'll say like we can cover all the costs, most of the times, it's like you can spend the money wisely, or you spend it in storage, absolutely.
Yeah.
And honestly, like Paul and I working on one project, like in rural area. Certain, it's on the, certain. Or like certain 100-acre land, some of that. Fly was kind of like bought those 10 years ago, I got a couple churches like, go this one, I want this one, I want this. Was kind of like, hey, I mean, no study, internet here, and then I told them that by the time I look at it, the experience like that. If you go by the viewpoint, you see some of the, if you see all the plant colors that's slightly different, that was value, like why is it so green, that's so gray or dark? There's a question mark basically over here that could be a wetland, could be a, the border cross over
Yeah,
there.
for sure.
Can't really climb the town, see all, it's all green over there.
Yeah.
Don't see any lake. Something like that.
Yeah.
It'll be amazing.
Guys, I gotta
You'll
see
be
like
amazed, some of the people, especially a lot of those Germans, actually, all those land fire. All this, it's on acre land, and this miles is on hectare land, so the guys in the world. So, when I look at it, it's just, like about 50% of all gets to wetland, of course. Mercury is actually, with,
well, for SDA, they're good, so. Really like to, when they come. Doing their one, on the 800,000 from South closest, in the submission, and I just can't imagine without doing this kind of studies that can't want to.
Yeah.
And you said German client, we had a German client one time, rented, the Cougar helicopter.
Yeah.
Well, bought it out.
Come and bought it.
It was an acre. The logic was they went up at night. They wanted to see where the street lights at. So they bought the property because the view is where street lights ends, city will go and be next. I mean, that's great logic. We should put that on our website.
Okay, good.
Anyway, we did the report and like, well, guys, we have a little bit of an issue here. So basically 50% of it was a wetlands, like 2012. It was a exotic species, like pink willow, what do they call that flower? Manitou, the willow. I can't remember the exotic, that's the stuff we were.
And the other thing is like, that's the reason why you see, and some of the lands could be in the market for years. Part of the reason, like on the listing that we talked about, 20 to 30 days turnover. Lands could be in the market for years, say 5-10 years, and what's kind of raising if you help the client in this kind of like profit, maybe it's worth why for them to pay a couple $1,000 for this one instead of being, waiting over here, because nobody gonna touch it, nobody without this proper information. Potential buyer, developers, they're not gonna get, it's not my cut. They probably paid. So maybe 10, 20 $20 to study because the land is out of proper information, so.
And after a while, it just looks like you're unloading a problem.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if something sits for that long, then there's nothing, no data, no
Yeah,
documentation.
there's a reason
about
for
what's going on. It starts to smell bad.
Especially you see the land of people, pending for sale, for pending for sale. It's probably a red flag, see, if you have a buyer to see that one, you always see why there's so many things happening. They don't really obligate to disclose those kind of information to you.
Yeah.
But you probably sometimes either, if. I have listed a couple properties in the past and I check the history and say, what's going on here? And then study, they have no idea the bet, and then if you don't keep those in record, and you want to, if you're the listed agent. You don't have proper information, you're gonna end up like all the other agents in the past, because it's different. Probably have a, up then, probably contact with, the professionals that are here. So worse, and you actually add a cost on top of that.
I think that's the message. Call you. That's it, just call you.
And we're always happy with clients. We can meet here. Our office is 2 doors down, Water Muckatollis. We have free parking. It's good. And by the way, just the last comment is that we never mark up our price for recommending somebody. But whether that's an engineer or whatever, that's their price, right? So sometimes we loop that in, but their costs are costs, so we never have a markup. It's just so you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna set a meeting next time,
I appreciate that. It's great.
Amazing.
We'll send all this out and the next day or so you have it. But we look forward to the opportunity to work with everybody. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Chris, can you stop the recording up there? Great.
Shelley Dean, nice to meet you. I have a quick question. I have somebody who's telling me, thank you about listing.
Thanks for having us.
I already know that, road frontage is only like 250 feet, so they can only put an 8 unit. So we have to go through, the board and.
I like to know.
So all that's possible.
Oh, yeah, we do that. And actually, it's interesting.
I was losing my mind.
Director of planning.
I was trying to listen.
That was my first job. They're generally.
Well, yeah,